Welcome to Ask Christian Counseling Associates with your host, Dr. Rich Hoffman, founder and clinical director of Christian Counseling Associates, or CCA. We are the leading faith-based counseling organization. It is our hope that during your listening time, you will receive sound clinical advice, inspiration, and timeless wisdom to face daily challenges. And now, here is your host of Ask Christian Counseling Associates, Dr. Rich Hoffman.
Welcome to Ask Christian Counseling Associates. I'm your host, Dr. Rich Hoffman, and today we have a return guest, Sheena Abraham from Christian Counseling Associates. And the title of our podcast today is Managing Anger from a Biopsychosocial Spiritual Perspective. I'm just going to ask Sheena to tell us what people are angry about as we get started. And I want our audience to think about what are people dealing with today? What are people angry about?
So one of the things I often see in sessions, and a big thing I do is trending here at Christian Counseling Associates, just doing public relations. Many of the things that I see people are angry about, we're still recovering from COVID. That's a huge red flag for everyone, where they just find themselves being upset. Another thing, going back to school, even though it'd be really exciting. People are wondering, what do we do with our kids? Moving them into college, which Kristen did awesome at the last podcast we did. Are we wearing masks again? What's happening overseas in Afghanistan? These things are trending in the United States, and we're trying to figure out whether it is simply that, or in our marriages, our jobs. There's so many things that can cause us to be angry, but I think, once again, like I said, what's trending here in the United States today is still COVID.
Here we are at the end of summer 2021.
A year and a half later.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
That we're still struggling with that, and there are people on both sides of issues. Mm-hmm. And I would want to tell our audience, whatever you're dealing with in this, that CCA is a place that you can come, that we're going to walk alongside you in that. And we chose this podcast today because we know plenty of people are reaching their limits.
Yes.
And not only with this,
yeah.
but anger is something that we see here frequently.
Yes.
People reach their limit with anger a lot. And so, are you angry, irritated, ready to explode, grouchy, annoyed?
Yeah.
This podcast is for you. So we want to do something special with this topic today, and that is, there's plenty of ways that you can look at a problem, and even when going to counseling, people look at things according to some kind of theory. What we do here at CCA is we take a holistic approach, and that is from a biopsychosocial spiritual approach. The problem of anger, and any problem that you bring to counseling, is complex. And without considering all of these things, you really miss the mark. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to have a counselor and to have a viewpoint that's going to let you look at the whole picture.
Yeah, especially when they're coming from a different perspective, because when you're in your anger, all you see is you and what that person has done to you. When you're coming into Christian Counseling Associates, we're sitting across from you and we're walking this out. There's that accountability, that's being vulnerable, that transparency, and so we don't take that lightly. You're coming with us we're walking with you, essentially. It's that one-on-one to where, okay, what's going on? And all the pieces go together. And our job is to help you to understand, and how do we walk that out.
That's right. So let's break this down according to those levels. What's anger all about? First, the biological part. And what we want to realize first is that anger is a primary emotion. It's been with us a long time. We knew how to do this as babies. So I didn't like my carrots, at lunchtime. You took my toy. You change the TV channel. One of the things that I knew how to do is get angry.
Yeah, and you voice that anger.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's part of how we're designed to express this. It's primary, it's basic. And the bad news about that is that if we don't progress past that, if we're still at that kind of basic level in a complex situation, as an adolescent in school, dealing with an exam, dealing with a life transition, an adult dealing with a marriage, dealing with a career that you've prepared for a decade. And now I'm just using this really basic way of responding. It can be a disaster. And so what does that? We're going to go through some research that has been done. So, what is all about the biological part? And an old part of the theory was, that anger is part of a fight or flight response. And so researchers for years have said this is how we're wired up, and stress triggers this response. And, that involves things in our nervous system. And so there is this sympathetic and parasympathetic part of our central nervous system, and that excites us, lets us spring into action, and it calms us down. And we hope that is working right. And there's also the endocrine system. It is the chemicals that get put into our bloodstream. It's like a slower kind of way that things work in our body. And then so there's these hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine. And so there's been talks about how that affects us biologically. But most recently there's been a lot of talk about cortisol. And we note this in the fact that we have to have a consideration about what anger does to us physically. And as we elevate in our anger and we use this consistently, that can cause health problems. It can overtax our system as we're in a state where we're ready to defend our lives.
Yeah.
So these biological factors, if I was to use our knowledge of that we can get into that kind of state, the first thing in managing anger from a biological perspective is to remember the word halt. Now, some of our viewers may have heard this before, but halt is usually thought of as hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Now, we changed that just a little bit here to hungry, anxious, lonely, tired.
Yeah.
So anytime you're in one of those four conditions, this is probably working on your system, and you're having a biological response. And we just want people to be aware of that. When you are fearful, when you're lonely, in a place of inferiority, when you're tired, you're just not biologically functioning like you normally would.
Yeah.
And so this is a time where you're going to be more careful. Things you say, things that you do.
But I think you see that with HALT specifically. I can just think of some teenagers that I've been in youth ministry for years, and then even with counseling now, when it comes to teenagers and being tired, you find them, especially in this generation, whether they're on their social media, video games, staying up, especially coming into school now, just the anger that is like, it's now high up there because they are lacking sleep or what they're doing and this, that, and the other. And so it's learning what is causing my teenager to act out, because it literally could be, are they hungry? Are they anxious? Are they feeling lonely? Are they tired? And so when we look at that as a whole, I often think about with going back to that fight or flight, like that becomes that defense mechanism to where it's like, I'm going to fight you, Mom, for you talking to me. And it's just like, no, that's not what I'm trying to figure out what's wrong, what's going on. Or we're not ready to talk about it. Whether I just think specifically, I work a lot with children and teens, like that fight or flight. And even thinking as an adult of myself, it's like, what's your reaction? So it's being careful as simply as being hungry. Yeah. You just snap and it's like, oh, I haven't eaten today. Well, that makes sense why you're speaking like that or coming towards someone.
Yeah, so I don't know if you could relate, Sheena, or any of our listeners. Hungry and tired are the combination that gets me. So at the end of a long day, I haven't eaten, and I get home and I talk to my wife, Renee, and I'm just saying, it's just all bad. This is it. I'm done. I'm done being a counselor. I'm done with everything. And she has this way of looking at me and saying, you know what? You're tired. Just sit down, eat something. And I remember I'm going to feel differently, in about an hour.
Agreed.
Probably be sleeping. However, if I was to make a decision right then on something.
Oh yeah, it's irrational thinking, because even I know it's silly as food, that all plays a part in your system. Yeah. I mean, you just how that was your example for you. For me, because we're especially as counselors, we can start early in the morning till late at night, and when you're always going, that's any job, especially once again never stopping during COVID, I found myself actually more emotional than not just with that hungry and lonely part, but very emotional to where it's like, I'm done. I just want to go to bed. It's just like, go eat some nuggets, Sheena, you're fine. So it's just like, and that's what it was. And it's just like, and you have to know yourself better than anyone, which you do. And of course, God created you. So like, okay, this is what I need at this time, instead of just, don't make serious decisions at that time.
So that's HALT.
Yes.
One biological way to deal with things. The second is some research that I feel is pretty important for us to consider. And that is with John and Julie Gottman.
Yeah.
They are experts in marriage. And a lot of the research that they do, we use for marriage counseling.
Which is amazing. So if you're looking for marriage counseling, come to CCA, obviously. But the Gottmans, they are phenomenal in what they do.
Yeah, so they have done research around what happens when we're in an argument, and the best way to deal with that. And one of the core ways of managing arguments is realizing when you're flooded. And so what happens biologically, as you get into a conflict with your spouse, all of that adrenaline, cortisol, and the things that we just mentioned that are happening biologically flood into your system, and you're not paying attention. But if you actually take your pulse, you can see that your pulse is rising, and there's other changes. Your temperature is rising, and we train people here just to simply gain an awareness of that. But when you're flooded, now what you're saying is not meant to reason through something with somebody. It is meant to either destroy what's in front of you or get you away. And so what you're going to say doesn't really make sense anymore, and you just have to wait. And sometimes for some people, when you're flooded, it takes about a half hour or longer to get back down to what you're usually operating like. And so just having a respect for it alters the way that you see things and do things. And you're in a mode now to fight. You're totally
in that defense mode. I often will tell couples that I counsel, it's like the fighting, you're not getting very far. And it's like, take a break. And I've seen that be successful. It's like, now you're just poking at that person, and it's just like, I know what buttons bother you. So now I'm just going to go at you, and that's fighting dirty. And what does that actually do for your marriage or a conflict among friends? Because then, can that person still feel safe if you're going to keep coming at them? It's like marriage is a safe place. It's a covenant. And so recognizing it's like, oh, I'm feeling myself get worked up. okay, I need to take a break. I need to come back, revisit this. And I'm not saying take like hours of breaks. Like, you need to come back and you need to deal with that conflict.
Yeah, so second thing, flooded, take a time out.
Yes.
Okay, finally, sometimes things can happen to us biologically that will alter us.
Yeah.
Maybe temporarily, unfortunately, it can become chronic or permanent. So, and some examples of that would be people who have abused substances, or you're on a certain type of medication, and now you're just not functioning the same biologically. An actual example would be, I knew of somebody who had used heroin for many years, and he had recovered. He quit using. However, just the way that his brain was going to work now is different. And so managing emotions, managing anger, it just becomes more challenging. And let me say to our audience who might really be able to relate to, just knowing that they're more challenged, that we never call it quits. We never say that it's over. Part of the Christian faith and part of what we instill in people here is there's always a way that we could overcome.
Yes.
And with God, He will lead us in that way. That is our hope, and that is what we'll strive for. We'll never give up. And so when we're in that kind of condition, though, we want to identify that and consider that it's time for intervention. And so here at CCA, we have resources for people. We've worked hard to make things available that aren't available other places in a smaller practice, or in some places they won't offer what we have to offer here. So a couple things that I'll mention. First, alpha stim. It rebalances the way that your brain functions, and for depression, anxiety, insomnia, which would be caught up in anger, for about 80% of the people, it brings them down, it gives them calming, and you use it once a day for 20 minutes.
Yes.
And it just works fantastic.
And we have success stories here that people do use this, and it's like it has changed their life. And that's beautiful, because you think, what is alpha stim? What's that going to do for me? And so if you're questioning and kind of want to go in that route instead of trying to figure it out on your own, give us a call. We'll walk that with you, and it's great, because even in session, it's like we do that with you. We help you figure that out. So once again, it's like partnering with each other.
Yeah. So we have alpha stim. We provide that here. Free Spira. Yes. Which is a biofeedback technique that we use that retrains the way people breathe. And teaches them how to do this, and it affects the limbic system of their brain, effective for severe anxiety, panic, and PTSD. Yes. And so it changes the way that the brain works biologically. Yes. Without medication. So it's really great. So that's another thing that we provide. Now, in some cases, things are going to be so out of whack just biologically that it's time for medical intervention. And a lot of times, because we're cautious about that, people might say, we're against medication, or they might not be able to find that somewhere. We have psychiatry available here at CCA. Yes. Dr. Charles Motzinger. Yes. He's available, and he just does great work. He's a Christian. Yeah. And so in a prayerful way, works with our team as a group of Christians to provide psychiatry. And then, finally, when nutrition comes in, and diet, and just looking at the whole physical picture, both Dr. Charles Motzinger, but also Dr. Jim Gardner, right here in New Wilmington, Pennsylvania, consults with CCA. He's on our team and provides medical care, for the whole person. Yes. Just really, really quality medical intervention. Yeah. That you're not going to find other places. And we truly work as a team. And so, that's the final technique here, is that sometimes you just have to take extra special care of yourself and seek intervention, or it's going to be too much of an uphill climb.
Yeah.
So that's the biological piece, dealing with anger. Now it's time to go to the psychological. So what is on the psychological level? Anger habits.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Sheena, how do you get angry?
We talked about this earlier as you were getting ready, and how I get angry is I am definitely, like I said, emotional, and so I cry, and I don't understand why I do. Like, if I get passionate, and so if things are starting to trigger me, I've had to learn, once again, counseling, huge, learn to know my triggers, to where it's like, okay, I feel myself, I start to feel myself get heated, and I breathing heavy, like, and I get angry, like, I cry, and no one talked to me. Like, that's what it's like. I need a moment. It's real though. It's like, I know myself, but before I really started paying attention, I would just kick and scream. Like, literally, I was one of those.
Well, Sheena, I've never seen you cry, and we don't want to get into all that today. That's the pattern there.
Yeah.
So it's a habit that when you have all this energy, and even when you're angry, you could cry.
Yeah.
And that is what comes out. So we won't talk about my anger, right? I guess quickly, it's not good. When I get angry, I can yell. I can attack people.
Yeah.
Hopefully not physically, but verbally. What comes into my mind is every word in the book.
Yeah.
And I'll use every bit of my intelligence to attack you with that. And if that happens, it's damaging. People around listening to that, and I can get loud and talk very loud. Now, hopefully, you're looking at me and say, Rich, I would just never imagine. Again, though, I've had that since the beginning. And so, really, what we want to look at, here is that we could look back at the biology of things, and even with maybe we forgot to mention one thing. There's things about us like temperament. It's part of our personality. It's sort of molded into there, and we can just say to the world and to the important people in our lives, this is the way that I am. There's nothing I can do about it. And we have a saying here at CCA, and it's something that I want the audience to really weigh carefully with me, as I have with everybody that I work with, and that is, it's not the situation that is responsible for your anger or whatever your emotional pain is. And that, by saying that, what we mean is, it's not, that I was born this way, or I was in this situation of fight or flight. What we really need to realize is what is being brought out of me that goes all the way down to the heart.
Yes.
And that is me, and it's mine to deal with.
Yes.
The spiritual heart. And so, what we're seeing in anger and what's going through our mind is coming from that place. And over time, we establish patterns from that, habits. And we begin to need people in our lives who will help us gain awareness of that and gain control over it. So we need to take a look at these types of patterns. What types of patterns are there in anger? And I'm going to list a couple, just real quick, so people could sort of maybe identify with which pattern that they might, or how they might get angry. The first one is just direct anger. Okay, I have people I go after, or things, or the cat, or the dog. There is an object, a person. And right now, we want to identify, it's a lot of times the people who are closest to us. They become the easiest.
But you have to see that in counseling when they're talking, especially when you see in family sessions, because there's that family member is safe So it's like, of course I'm going to verbally throw up on you because you're my spouse or you're my parent. And so I feel safe with you, in a sense, to hurt you with my words because I know you're still going to love me. And what I will often tell, whether it's family or individual, you cannot control others. You have to control yourself. So as we talk about those patterns, remember, I can't control how you react to things, only my reaction. And those things like that. So that made me think of that when we were discussing that a little bit earlier.
Sure.
So.
And oftentimes we have people who will enable us.
Yes.
And so many times people are not going to come to counseling at CCA when it's just directed towards the people that are safe, because it will remain private.
Yeah.
And there will be no problems until it comes to us in marriage counseling or in parenting, where the person is saying my life has become unmanageable and things are going to start to erode. So the second one, though, when anger becomes generalized, and that means I'm such at a level of not being in control that anybody at school or work or at church, it's starting to get out.
Yeah.
And it's wherever it happens, it's triggered, and man, why'd you do that? We could tell there was something wrong with you. And you're thinking like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, because now you're starting to be vulnerable, and then it's that, once again, fight or flight. It's just like, or even look at it like this, it's like, I'm going to avoid, like, I don't want you seeing how I get angry.
Yeah.
Just like you'd say, because you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Like, you could be the best person ever, and then here it's starting to flow out, like you said, generalized anger, to where it's like,
well, and what I think is that people will sort of see that as a curse, or and they run away.
Yeah.
I see this especially in church.
Yes.
That I had a real interaction, it went bad, I'm gone, and really it's a blessing. That gets out, and you have to acknowledge it.
Yes.
Here's an opportunity. So I know that people really feel bad when that happens, and really, I'm not encouraging anybody to lose control, but it happens.
Yes.
And that becomes time where you have to own that and get help for that, and even up to going to counseling and admitting that you have a problem. That could be the beginning of a turnaround. So generalized anger can be a great thing. Third, passive-aggressive anger. Back to anger that's really tricky. This is my favorite, is, I'm going to mess something up now. And I'm going to do it. Sometimes it's unconscious, but a lot of time the person who's passive-aggressive, they're doing it all on purpose. I'm going to mess you up. I'm going to throw a wrench into the works. I'm going to blow something up and say, I didn't mean to do it.
Yeah.
And the person who you're angry at comes back and says, what did you do? Why would you do it? Why did you do it? And then I say back in a real cool way, what's wrong? Why are you so angry?
Yeah.
and they're walking away saying, like, what is wrong with this person?
Yeah.
And a lot of times that stuff eventually severs the whole relationship.
Yes.
And it's just, it's hard to figure out passive-aggressive anger. It's like the backward door that you use to express something. It's not out front. It's underneath.
Yeah, and it's really messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we see that a lot, and so the last part maybe also equally as deceptive, more damaging for the person who's angry is anger that's internalized. So when this is at work, anger internalized means it's anger turned inward. It's damaging. Why? Because now that's going to end up in going underground into the unconscious, and the person becoming bitter or even depressed.
Yeah.
And so it's all that energy that is in that fight or flight now just being shoved down. So destructive, all the forms. Hopefully that gives our listeners something to think about there. It definitely is designed for us to self-reflect on and saying, what is the habit there? What is the pattern that has been worked out? But let me tell you a secret. It is one of these things where we actually, it's best done figuring out this pattern when we have a mirror in front of us. And that mirror becomes the people who are closest to us. A lot of times, though, unfortunately, they become used to it and they've enabled it. And that's another reason why you have a counselor, is hopefully we're good at just calling it for what it is.
Yeah, and not sweeping it under the rug in your family. It's like the whole avoidance thing. But what I often hear when you talk about that anger internalized is, I'm fine. It's okay. I'm fine. I always say that. And it's like, you're not fine. Like, you're kicking your dog. Like, we need to figure this out. And so being able to go in and dig that out. And it's not an overnight process either. It always is messy before it gets good. Because it's like, that's years. It's like an onion. You're peeling it back. And you have to be okay to go there. And so not running away when things start to get hard. Just as in church, like you said, it's like, oh, I'm exposing myself. I'm going to run. No, we want you to stay. We want you to show up for your sessions, because every time we meet, it's like going further and further, and it's like, okay, there's the root. Let's pluck that out and see that healing happen.
And through a relationship, that's God's design.
Yes.
Things can change.
Yes.
And so with these patterns, once we become aware of them, and hopefully we've got some ideas there, then the mission is, instead of reacting, to respond to anger. And that is all, and we've all heard this, that's where the coping skills come in. Like, we're going to develop a different way in accountability with other people, and those people are going to tell us how we're doing.
Yes.
And it's going to happen over time. We are going to learn and practice another way of dealing with all of that energy. And that can truly happen in relationship, whether it's in counseling with trusted accountability within the church, or even family members who are not yet becoming enablers.
Yes.
So another factor that we have to mention here with the psychological part of things is starting to build an awareness of things that have happened that alter the way of our patterns in our life. And we're going to specifically talk about trauma. So there's things that have happened in childhood.
Yeah.
There are things that have happened along the way. And there's things like PTSD, where certainly people in military who have just been in a theater where it's life and death. And so thankful that people are willing to put themselves in that situation for the good of all of our country. Police officers, firefighters, but also accidents, that put you in that situation. And it could just be one time, or it can be over the course of much time, where now whatever patterns that you had, those have been altered, and now there's strong urges that you could be sitting in a situation like this, and just something that you hear, something that you see now makes you feel that you're back in that life-threatening situation.
Yes.
And that's trauma.
Especially, I know I've dealt with in the past veterans who've seen seen someone being killed, or explosions, to where now it affects their family. If something is happening and they have that flashback, and that anger comes up, and not being afraid to actually talk about it, in these sessions, like those who face, whether it is war or being a police officer, like allowing them to have those emotions and to be real and raw with what happened. And that's the great thing with counseling, is this is a safe place. And so the things that you've hidden, once again, internalized your anger and that trauma, coming into a room and being like, look, I saw this, this, and this. And it's like, I hear you and I see you. And it being empathetic.
Yeah, so there's ways that can be worked out. It starts with pinpointing those things, understanding that they're there, and bringing them back out, and re-experiencing that in a different way, changing the pattern. And that is really important. So the final thing that I'll say about the psychological part of this is also the basic technique of becoming watchful. Whatever your habit is, whatever way that you do that, whatever trauma is in your life, let's watch this happen and acknowledge when it does. And we have a saying around here that was taught to us by somebody wise, that slow is fast. When you are being urged by an anger reaction, that you're being pushed and it's time, things are flying through your mind, the emotions are coming quick, and the bottom line of that is saying, speak now, act now, do something that is going to destroy. And you're in a place like this, it's time to slow it down.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, here in the counseling, when we're being put into an urgent situation, we just know when we're feeling that urgency that it's time to be careful, to slow it down so we make the right choice. Slow is fast.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we want to train in, and that's what we're calling being watchful in our minds, stepping back, praying, seeking counsel, but just taking a step back and waiting.
Yeah.
Just for a little bit until the urgency is past. That is going to help us more efficiently deal with whatever problem, whatever urgency was there. We're going to get through it quicker. That's why we say slow is fast. Be watchful.
Yeah.
And that is taught to us in our faith.
And it's not even just for like adults, but I know working with children, adolescents, teens, it's crazy the really great resources when you're trying to teach your child not to scream when they're angry. I know I've shown different Daniel Tiger clips about, if you're being upset, count to 4. Like, these are the things that we're teaching even young kids. It's like, and even dealing with children who've been adopted, we see that trauma, and it's like allowing them to feel that and taking, once again, slow is fast. And it's like, okay, well, let's take it one step at a time. You don't need to scream or attack your parents and things like that. So being watchful, I love that. It's acknowledging that trigger, those emotions. And it's very important because essentially you don't want to hurt those around who love you. And so, again, creating that atmosphere of being safe.
That's the psychological piece. Next, the social piece.
Yeah.
This is all connected to relationships, and how this happens and how we do this is influenced by the social aspect. We're never truly alone, and if we are, we're in a very dysfunctional spot.
Yeah.
And so we were designed to be in relationship.
Yes.
We were designed to function in community. And so anger or any other problem happens in community. It happens in connection to relationships. So what we're going to ask you to think about with anger and a way of managing this is to realize that anger severs relationship. And instead of moving to a place where God designed us to be in connection with people, it moves us away. That flight is eventually, or whatever we had in front of us got destroyed. It's time to see that happen socially. Anger can be destructive. It can also just be a highly socially influenced thing. So, my parents used to tell me, and I didn't like it when they said it, but they said, "Rich, you are who your friends are."
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I know some of our audience doesn't like to hear that either.
Yeah.
The truth that spoke to was that there's a high amount of influence.
Yes.
From what we're connected to in our social relationships, in our friendships, in our family, in our community. So, we'd like to look at the people, places, and things. And people that we experience struggling with anger, when it becomes explosive, there's a long line of people who are also angry.
Yeah.
Groups, organizations, music.
I also think about, like you said about your parents, you can learn your coping skill or how you get angry from your parent, well, my dad always punched the wall, or my dad always screamed at mom. And so I know I've seen that in sessions, so where it's like, oh, if we're doing a family session, it's like, that's why, because this is how mom talks to dad. And I even thought about when you were talking about like the idea of anger, dealing with anger and kind of detaching yourself, shame plays a part with that as well. It's like, well, I'm embarrassed, or I have this shame, this wall, I can't be around others. And so this is something that kind of sparked in my head when you said that about the idea with anger. Why are we angry? Is there shame there? What are we hiding? That's because it's easy to combat people because you want to hide what's really going on.
Yeah.
Or you could simply just say, well, you hurt my feelings. It's like, well, I'm not going to tell you that because we don't talk about our feelings. And once again, your environment and how you grow. In my house, we don't tell our emotions, or in my house, we tell everyone. And it's just, wow, like our environment, our friends, like you said, our music. And it's true. My mom said the same thing. It's who you surround yourself is who you become, you know?
So the Bible has a lot to say about anger.
Yes.
And a lot of that's found in Proverbs. So Proverbs 22:24. Do not associate with a man given to anger, or go with a hot-tempered man, or you will learn his ways and find a snare for yourself. There's some tough choices sometimes. We're really going to deal with things. And let's say at this point we're through the biopsychosocial part of this. You know, anger is just a surface kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's an easy, way to deal with things, but there's always more difficult things deep down. And there's a reality to, again, that heart issue that we're just trying to avoid. It would just be easier to stay angry. However, that's what we're getting to here, is that we're getting to the place where we're going to deal with real things. And sometimes it's about significant life choices.
Yes.
And maybe that starts out in childhood, parents helping to guide that. Maybe it's in adulthood. You know, maybe we find ourselves in places, in careers, in wrong places.
Yeah.
And anger is telling us that, and it's getting out of control. And that's part of, we can see that as a curse, or that is how, like, our social connection can start to be part of that signal that tells us.
Yeah.
So, what we do here is we want to bring about God's design as part of the healing. And so we provide a social intervention, and that is the TAG group, TAG. We're designed to be in transparency, accountability, and to find growth in that. And that's why we call our group counseling TAG groups. A lot of times people are going to come to individual counseling, and that's great, but they reach a plateau. They reach a place where this really needs to happen in connection with other people who are working on something. And so we provide that here as part of that social intervention.
Yeah.
And what that does really is, there's a next step to everything that we do, but you're doing that in church too.
Yes.
We call those life groups. You're going to do life with people out in the church, but if you want to skip over that, if you want to avoid it, you're going to miss a really important part of how this all works out. And a lot of times, anger, and for people, we really, once again, we worked hard at CCA to, no matter how chronic the problem is, you come here, it's all here for you.
Yes.
We're going to provide it, and it takes a lot of people to get that done.
Yes.
And so even we have specific anger management groups, and we have those available online. So we have people, unfortunately, who are in trouble, and maybe they don't want to be seen even like walking into a place, and they have a requirement.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we can get to that place with this. We provide specific anger management online, expert counselors who are going to bring about even that social part. That you're going to leave that group with a new perspective, a new way of dealing with things, with the opportunity to experience transformation. That's what happens in TAG groups.
Yeah.
That's what happens in our anger management groups. And there's some people out there listening, or some people in your family or in your friend group they need that now.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is in those tag groups, there is accountability. That it's, hey, I'm really struggling this week, or how did you do this? And having those counselors, hey, let's try this, or have you thought about this? So that challenge, that transparency, it's so important. Like, say you do plateau in your individual, cool, let's check out tag. And once again, there's now more people who are in your corner, who are walking with you, like God designed us for community. Small groups are so important because there is accountability, and with your counselor as well. It's like, hey, where are you at? Where are you coming to session? Accountability. Stop running. We're here, and you just got to get through the hard innocence hump of coming and acknowledging that there is that anger issue or whatever you're facing, anxiety. Now, we saw that in the last year. It's like people flooded Christian Counseling Associates because we were open and we were helping. And that's what it is, being the hands and feet. And that's simply the heart. It's like, how do we disciple you to go, and live that healthy life that God has created you to live? And tag groups are phenomenal. Anger management, join in online. They're super important. So important.
Yeah, so both on-site and online.
Yeah.
And what we're really doing is preparing people to find this spiritual core, this faith core, the place where God speaks to us in our heart. And so let's bring it to the last part of dealing with things. And what we really want to be set apart about as we work with people, and we want people to engage us on this, is to find the spiritual core of the problem, and the design of how that all works out. And that is the spiritual part of the biopsychosocial spiritual part. That is the center of how this is all going to work out. Either we engage that or we really don't overcome.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of counselors that you can see, there's plenty of interventions that you can seek that's going to promise to make you feel better. And really when it gets down to it, yeah, you might feel better, but nothing has really changed about your life.
It's just a Band-Aid.
And sooner or later you find yourself back there.
Yeah.
And I hope anybody listening, right now realizes that you can do better.
Yeah.
And that we want, true heart change for you and for us. And so I'm going to read from John chapter 15, verses 1 through 4, and Jesus tells us this. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. You must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. And so there is this reality. Apart from that spiritual core, apart from that connection to God, apart from submitting to that, we can do nothing.
Yes.
And it's not going to be possible to deal with anger, truly, depression, anxiety, whatever it is, your marital problems, without that spiritual core connection. And so that is why the spiritual part of dealing with this issue is the place we should start. Although, that is where we hope people to be at the end of our counseling, is in a life group, in a church, in the community,
Yes.
where they know how to do this. And really with anger issues, explosive anger, and the damage that's been done, we find so many people who are isolated, and it's been such a long time that either they never really understood how that worked, or they've lost the ability to do it. And that's, going back to the tag group, we train that, into the process where people become comfortable, they grow into a place where they can see it again, they can see how God works,
Yes.
they can see the importance of the heart issue, the connection with God, experience it. And it's a very easy next step now to do it without a counselor.
Yeah.
Living together with people in the community and church, and experiencing transformation in life.
I think that's what sets Christian Counseling Associates apart from everyone else, because of the God factor that comes in. Because now you have built that relationship, not just with others, but now it's with God. And so as you learn, like we talked about in John 15, apart from me, you could do nothing, remain in me. And so when you're remaining in the Father and you're attending church, you're in your tag group, you're in your small groups, those groups, you're going to start to see fruits. And so one of the fruits I think about is self-control. And so self-control in regards to your anger, depression with joy. And so these fruits that have been plaguing you for so long are now, you get fresh fruit that's coming. That fruit lives in you. And it grows when you're in the Word. You're being held accountable. John 15, apart from God, you literally can do nothing. And with God, all things are possible. So what you thought wasn't going to work, you end up seeing, people see a change. You see your life has been transformed. Then you, in turn, can then minister and disciple others. So
the Bible refers to that, and the faith refers to that as fruits of the Spirit, as self-control, a fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And in that way, God speaks to us, in that moment of decision, where I'm going to say something, I'm going to do something. There's thoughts rushing through my mind, and now I can hear this deeper voice.
Yeah.
And something deeper becomes more important, something really good.
Yes.
And that's what we hope for our people. That is at the core of this transformation, where we're now really dealing with anger, but we're not dealing with it alone.
Yeah.
That's the Holy Spirit in our heart, and that is the church around us.
Yeah.
That is, seeing our heart, holding us accountable, drawing us in a different way. So, we're also talking about just important things that begin to weigh on us in a good way, that we begin to value. Some more things from Proverbs, just to hear that this is God's way of dealing with anger. This is what He can place in our heart at a level that gets there before the thought, before the pattern gets to our, to our head, or we act off of that habit. Proverbs 19:11. A man's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook a transgression. Instead of this now, like what we want to do is have power over somebody or have aggression, we begin to see it as something that's full of glory, to overlook it.
Yeah.
And that is supernatural. That is spiritual. That is what God can do for us. Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Yeah. But a harsh word stirs up anger. Yeah.
The beautiful thing, the Holy Spirit, not only is He a comforter, He's the teacher. He promises to obviously never leave us, and so He directs us and putting a guard over our mouth. It also says that in Proverbs. And I often think, not only do I need a guard for my mouth, but also my face when things are said, or if even in offense. And I love the whole idea of having that glory, that power that you said from the Holy Spirit, to overlook what people have done, that transgression. Absolutely beautiful. And that only comes from that remaining in me, John 15.
Yeah, and I'd want us together, our listeners and me and you, to just acknowledge that as miraculous.
Yes.
When we can be in a place like that. So Proverbs talks a lot about that. The New Testament in James, chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. This my beloved brothers and sisters, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. And so we get into these kinds of pattern changes that are spiritual, where now we're starting to pay attention to how much we listen instead of how much we're speaking.
Yes.
And things like maybe like pulling back into a timeout when we're flooded now becomes so much easier because there's been a heart change. If we value these things in a supernatural way, again, it's all going to be different. And along that spiritual path that God is calling us to be on, that we do with a Christian counselor, with people of the church, with trusted, faithful family members, that'll happen for us. And things sort of turn upside down, from something that is like a world reality to something that is a spiritual reality. And maybe this is a good final point, because there's so much you can say,
yes.
and so much that we will work with people here spiritually to develop that spiritual core. But that turning over, like a new side of a coin, Jesus tells us about this also when he says, "Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth." It doesn't make sense in a world's way that when you're gentle, and there's another word, word when you're meek, that is powerful.
Yeah.
And I thought about that a lot, but it's saying that when you're gentle, you'll be happy, and when you stay out of all these things that anger entices you into, which means you'll use your power to overpower everybody else, but there's always going to be somebody who's more powerful than you.
Mm-hmm.
And you get into that way, you're going to meet them. And I often think that what Jesus is really saying, and I believe it to be true, is it may work out that the gentle are the only people left standing at the end of all the power grabs, and those will be the people who are left with intact families, the people who can forgive, the people who can listen more. Those will be the people who remain in the jobs that they value, or in the place that they know is right. And so, it's miraculous that coin can flip, and we can see it a whole different and new way. And that's what we're working for here and in the church, and that truly can happen. So I want our listeners to take a look at this, the biopsychosocial, and most importantly, the spiritual reality of the anger problem. Realize that you could work through this in that kind of holistic way. And when you do, our hope is you're going to find transformation. You're going to find a way to deal with your anger, and you're going to overcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening today. And Sheena, let's pray for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Father, we thank you that we know where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. So, Father, I thank you for these listeners. I thank you for this time, God, and whatever they are facing, we know that you are with them, God. So I pray for boldness if they need any help, God, that they would right now reach out. God, we just ask for you just to give us peace, Lord. We thank you that we get to come and that we can share our hearts with one another. And we love you, Father. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Ask Christian Counseling Associates. We hope that you have been blessed by today's presentation. Please visit the Christian Counseling Associates website, where you can comment on today's podcast, sign up for the weekly article, connect with our social media, or even schedule an appointment at one of our nearby locations. We also provide online counseling for those not in our immediate area. Thanks again for listening. May God bless you and keep you well along life's journey.